Hallo, guten Abend. Ich freue mich sehr, Sie euch alle zu unserer, darüber freue ich mich allerdings nicht, zu unserer Abschlussveranstaltung der Uni Romnja heute zu begrüßen. Wir haben geballte Power heute im Raum. Ich muss trotzdem erstmal mit profanen Technikansagen anfangen. Und zwar, das Panel wird auf Englisch stattfinden, weil wir eine Überraschungsgästin haben aus den USA, nämlich Alexandra Oprea, die ihren Vortrag, vielleicht erinnern sich manche, damals nur online halten konnte, aber sehr gerne auch zu uns Romani Pen nach Berlin kommen wollte und da eine andere Panelistin leider abgesagt hat, nämlich Sandra Selimović, freuen wir uns sehr, dass Alexandra Oprea heute hier ist und deshalb wird das Panel auf Englisch stattfinden. Wer Übersetzung braucht, kann sich hier vorne oder mir ein Zeichen geben, dann können wir es noch durchgeben, gerne die Headsets holen. Dann, wir streamen, aber das ist ja schon bekannt, das wird niemand aus dem Publikum gestreamt, sondern nur das tolle Podium. Und die letzte Ansage, wie immer wollen wir auch ein paar Fotos machen. Der junge Mann da im roten Pullover ist dafür zuständig und wenn es eine Person im Raum gibt, die nicht fotografiert werden möchte, bitte jetzt ihm Handzeichen geben. Das ist nicht der Fall. Okay, gut. Dann freuen wir uns über noch eine weitere Gästin. Hallo, schönen guten Abend. Darf ich euch zunächst unsere Moderatorin vorstellen, nämlich Roxanna Witt, also für mich Roxy, die heute dieses Panel, uns also durch dieses Panel geleiten wird. Roxanna ist, ich muss Roxy sagen, Roxanna ist für mich so ungewohnt. Also Roxy ist Vorsitzende, Mitbegründerin von Safe Space e.V. Sie organisiert unter anderem auch die Durchführung des Kulturfestivals der Sinti und Romani in Dortmund. Sie arbeitet zu vielen Schwerpunkten, aber vor allen Dingen auch zu Kultursprache, Digitalisierung, Rassismusprävention und psychischer Gesundheit. Sie ist uns alle als eine unglaublich temperamentvolle Kämpferin bekannt und wir freuen uns jetzt, also ich freue mich und ich hoffe, ihr euch alle mit mir auf dieses Panel. Ein herzliches Willkommen an das Panel.
I welcome all of you to the panel Sinti and Romani feministische Positions of the present, basis of knowledge, struggles and visions. You know, I wanted to open differently today because whenever we are granted spaces like this, it's exceptional. Today we are celebrating an exceptional achievement of the Romani feminist movement because we are coming to an end of the first round of the Uni Romnja, right? And this is something that should be normal in 2022, that we have 2024, that we have spaces like this, but it is not. It is not normal and it's not regular, and because it is so seldom that we are granted this opportunity to speak and to claim space that we actually pretty much deserve, and I will come to this in a minute. We are always striving for perfection because we are used that we have to perform perfection inside of the right gaze, because if we don't, we are about to lose the right to claim these spaces so quickly. And because of this, we are all exhausted constantly. I was exhausted when I prepared for this panel today, and all of my brilliant panelists felt the same when I talked to them, which is why I want to open this panel with a statement saying, we will not perform for you today. I decided we won't perform for your gadget gaze. Fuck that. These people here not only, and not only these people here, but all Romani women and Flinter people are excellent. They are breathing, they are sweating, they are striving excellent. They are embodying excellency day to day. And they are doing so because they have to survive. We have to be excellent to survive. We have to make up for all the shit that men do inside of our communities and outside of our communities. We have to survive, we have to support our children, and we have to support ourselves, to empower ourselves, because if we don't, nobody else will. Today I'm here with some extraordinary women who support other women and Flinter people on a daily basis through their work, through their genius, and just through their being. I'm so glad to have you here and to introduce you. It's an honor. It's an honor to introduce Svetlana Kostić, who is board member of the Romani Pen Archive, who have organized this series of panels, of inputs, of keynotes. Thank you so much for being here, Svetlana. Next to Svetlana is Hajdi Barz, who is also an activist, long-time activist, and a striving force in the Romani Pen Archive, and who's a researcher. She is the one who did the whole empowerment survey that we will come to later, maybe or not. And I'm glad that you're here, Hajdi. Thank you so much. Right from New York to Berlin is Alexandra Opria. She's not only an icon of the feminist movement and has been so for the past 30 years, but she is also a lawyer, an attorney, and so much more. Like, there's a long list of papers you really need to read. She is also a little bit exhausted, I see. You don't need to be, because, yeah, thank you so much for being here, Alexandra, and joining us for today's talk. And right next to me is my dearest colleague of Safe Space. She is also the leader, not only of Safe Space, but she's a leader in many senses. She's an artist and an expert on transgenerational trauma. Amdrita, I'm so glad to be here with you. So, just as I said, when I talked to all of you in preparation of this panel, what was a common denominator or common approach towards feminism is that it is exhausting. And as all of you are my icons, and when I look at all the inputs that have been happening during the Uni Romnja, I only saw icons and I imagined them to be exhausted as well. So my first questions towards all of you is, when you think of your favorite Romani female or Flinter superhero, what are the 3 traits, the 3 characteristics that define her for you? And what are the 3 things that right now exhaust her the most? Who wants to start?
Do we need a mic?
Yeah, there's the mic. You have to share it. Unfortunately, I have one of my own.
Should I start? I was just asking for the mic, but anyways. Okay, let me... so my first thought, I have many different idols from the last generations that have fought, that have... who made our path where we now standing and continue. And it's important to mention them because when we talk about feminists, these like Chaya Stoika, Anita Avujuzi, Fatima Hartman, Ilona Lagrin, may she rest in peace, and so many more have not been seen and have not been mentioned as part of the movement. And when I think about an idol and a person that was very actively in representation and representing all these resistance, civil rights fighter out of our Romani community, I have to think of my sister Isidora Rangelović. Honestly speaking, Yes, and this is from my heart and very honest, that she is an idol for me, because the trait she has is thinking of everyone but herself. And I remember when I started working with her, and she's my sister, she's my friend, and she's my mentor, and she taught me so many things. And there has been so many times where I ask her, like, why do you explain this to me? I mean, if you do it yourself, you will be faster, right? Like, she took so much patience in teaching me things, and she said, well, yes, but together we are stronger. So I think that's a special trait of my sister, and thinking of everybody and trying to include everybody, and much, much more. Thank you.
This is me. That's a hard question. I think when I think of my,
You have to hold the microphone.
when I think of my, I guess, Romani superheroes, I think of the ones that I, came of age with around 20 years ago.
Like this.
The ones that I
Yes.
came of age with around 20 years ago. Enisa Minova, who worked a lot on the virginity cults. Nicoleta Bitu, a Romanian Romani activist, and Carmen Gheorghe, who was here as well, Magda Matake, who was here. And I think that what I respect most about them is their bravery in existing in Europe, because it is not easy, right? Just getting up every day and doing what you do. And then, speaking truth to power within the community, and to Gaige, within the community, tackling something like the virginity cult, child marriages, domestic violence. That takes a lot of bravery. That's dangerous. You lose family members. You're told that you're bringing shame on your community. You're not really a Roma. You've become co-opted. And it takes a lot of bravery to do that work on the ground, day in and day out. And then when you leave your Romani spaces and all the baggage that comes with those spaces, then you go into the Gajikane spaces, right? Into the ivory tower, into academia, and you face a whole host of other types of oppressions. And it's not only Roma women, it's a lot of women of, it's all women of color, minority women, visible minority women, and they do it day in and day out. And I think it takes a certain amount of optimism as well, because you have to believe that there's a better way and that what you're doing matters, and it's hard to be optimistic. It's very easy right now, and everything is telling you to get depressed because not much has changed, and whatever has changed has often changed for the worse. So you have to maintain that optimism too, and it's not easy, right? So it takes blood, sweat, and tears, and work, and hard work. So I really respect that about the ones doing work on the ground.
Shall we all answer to this question?
Yes.
Okay. In my upgrowing, my first Romani feminists were my aunties and my beloved mother, my aunties, my cousins. And I still didn't know that this is actually feminism and this is something that should empower me, because this was actually what I was familiar with. But when I understood that they showed me many sides, many perspectives, how to be a Romdi, how to be a woman, actually how to be a human on first place, this gave me a lot of strength and softness in my resilience, because I was used to I was used to see a lot of harsh interactions between Gaje and Roma people that I was growing with. And I always thought something must be wrong with these women, with us. But my cousins and my aunties did their job well. They taught me very early in my age that this is actually how we supposed to be, that we should protect us, each other, especially when it's about intersectionality, because there was not one role or one form of feminism. For me, it was going out and not getting married early, not having children, and even articulating that I didn't want this, but I wanted to study, I wanted to have my own way of living. And this was at the beginning hard accepting, but for the others, they supported me. Although they married early, they choose their lives that seem to be for other people traditional, but for me it's also empowering to see a woman who decides to marry and to have children. This is the same for me, like when I say, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have children. So it's empowering to have a spectrum of feminism. And I grew up like this, so for me it's easier to accept intersectional feminism and empowerment through women than just black or white, because this doesn't exist. Not in my upgrowing and not in the reality. We are more than what the people perceive. And perception is reality, but the people need to check their own reality lenses. So it starts actually with this kind of interaction. So I'm really happy to have these role models, and especially my mother and my sister. She's younger than me, but I see her as something bigger, and this makes me very humble as a Romani. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for this question, Roxanna. I was not prepared, that's why I passed on. So I needed a moment to think. I actually have to divide the answer into people who are exhausted and people who are inspiring to me, because somehow this makes sense in my mind. I want to start with exhausted so I can end on empowering people. Exhausted, when I think of a Romani woman who is exhausted, I have to think of my mother who passed away recently. And she was a cleaning lady in Germany. She was working hard all her life. She was trying to build things. And I think she struggled with racism in her own way by having a whole other reality created in her head. And I think it took her several years of her life, this kind of discrimination that she experiences. Oh my God, I didn't want to cry on the first sentence. Okay, but this is how this university lecture is. Everyone's crying, so I guess that's okay. And she taught me a lot about what not to do with my life, I think. And but also she was a survivor, you know, she was stubborn as hell. My mother was so stubborn, you know. She would be like, yeah, I want to send all my money to Serbia because I think it's right, you know. And I think, I don't know, so I feel that there's something that comes from this, you know, and this is something that also was passed on to my dear sister. I'm sorry, I have to talk about family. It's also Isidora Rangelović. And I know you hate this, I'm so sorry, but if she asks me for role models, what can I do? You were the one who, not only as my sister, but also as a very political person, very early on, were a visionary about what it meant that Romani women come together. You had this idea that we should meet each other, Romnja and Sintice, when back then it wasn't a thing. Romnja and Sintice, immigrant Romnja, German Sintice, and so on. because you were like, okay, we are experiencing racism. It is similar, what we're experiencing. And you were collecting and picking out these women. You were like, oh yeah, I heard there's a Sinti woman who did a lecture and she went there. And I remember us sitting on the sofa and being like, yeah, there's this law school. They want a Roma lawyer. We don't have a lawyer. Where do we find this lawyer now? Found her on TV, yeah. And we were glad and we wrote her. It was a bit, I feel that there was so much clarity that you gave to us also, in that it would bring us a lot to come together and to also getting out of this being singled out, you know, of these being not together, because that was the first thing we talked about, as I remember, was like, you're a social worker alone, you're the only Romani woman in your team, you're the only university teacher in your university who's Sinti, and so on. So I have the feeling that this was a common experience. You're the only student in your whole, I don't know, student corps of 400 people.
Only the first ones. They are the first, they have to.
Sometimes the first ones, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I can't, but yeah, often also the first ones. And so there was a lot of, what do we do with this experience? And we had to talk about it. And it was a lot of talking in living rooms. That was the Uni Romnja in the beginning, before we went to the streets. It was like, who are we? What are we experiencing? And then later on, we gathered more excellent women and we got our Romani pen archive. And I didn't understand the idea of the archive in the beginning, but you were like, yeah, we need to to bring our women to the front. And I think this is also what beautifully happened in this lecture series, and I'm so grateful for this to be happening. And also, I can't put my sister under exhaustion because I don't think she has this concept in her mind. You know, she will always work. It doesn't work together. I think there's also some kind of stubbornness, maybe, you know, about like having to answer to all the racism, and also to get away from just answering to racism, and also to like looking back at us. Who are we? What are we profiting from? You know, what are we profiting from? Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you for this question.
Thank you for your authenticity and your brilliant answers. What you have just said, all of you, has touched me deeply, to be honest, because when I was growing up, like I'm built in 1993, you know, there was little Romani representation. Actually, there was none, you know, there was none. And my first idols were my mom and my grandmother, and the narratives we had about strong Romani women in our own family, like, you know, those who didn't accept the cheating, those who didn't accept the beatings, those who didn't accept the shit that Hajdi would put them through. Like my first empowering narrative was of my grandmother, who, you know, just went into the school where my mother was beaten and bullied by the teachers and just beat the teacher. You know, this was the first very empowering narrative, that they would not take that shit. She was like, you will not do to my children what you have done to us. You will not do to my children what you have done to me. And my mom put me through a lot of violence herself, because we are somehow destined, you know, as long as we're not healing, to repeat the violence that we are experiencing. But she was always like, my children will have a better future than me. And I feel this is like the kind of power that our women and the Flint people in our communities have. They have this vision that we want a better future for our children, and we will give up our own lives if it means that our children will strive, right? However, they have to go through a lot of shit, and you mentioned some of the dimensions of that kind of shit that they have to go through while doing so. You mentioned racism, you mentioned classism, you mentioned poverty, right? And while we are having the privilege to sit here and talk about that, right now there is Romani women living that experience. Svetlana, you are not only a very, very smart woman on a lot of subjects, but you are researching the particular struggles that Romani women experience on the intersection of being a woman and being a Roma. what are the biggest struggles they go through right now, also regarding reproductive violence in Europe?
Oh, thank you. Like you said, so we are sitting here, and is it on? So we are sitting here, on the one hand, on a very privileged position, and like we talked before, and many conversations, like when we talk about Romani feminism, we always have to think it intersectional, and we have to consider our hundreds of years of persecution, of slavery, and of the genocide. So we are fighting on different fronts, basically. So in my work, I like to focus a lot on the concept of reproductive justice. That's a concept that, under the concept of reproductive justice, you can basically analytically as well as activistically dismantle many different forms of discrimination. And when we talk about different hurdles and mothers and women, we have to consider, like I would like probably to mention 4 main points that go hand in hand, which is the law of residence, housing, healthcare, and educational systems that we have here in Germany. And when I talk about the law of residence, there has been a Yugoslavia war in the 90s, which led thousands of Romani people to flee violence, discrimination, physical attacks, to flee to Germany. And here in Germany, they have been for 20, 30 years, for many different generations, almost some of them are already in a 3rd generation, and which still live under just a tolerance residence, how you would say, Duldung? Tolerance, yeah? Which brings a lot of which affects our community enormously, which hinders access and also produces a lot of inhuman conditions, I would say. For example, not having access to proper housing, living in shelters, or living in very small housing, in 2-bedroom apartment, 10 people with their children. Children don't have their rooms, and that's basically coming from racism, a lot from racism. I mean, there's even affected people that have German citizenships. Just because they are Roma, they're not getting the house, they're not getting the apartment, they cannot come out of the shelters. So it's a lack of resources. And all of this happens, I mean, when we talk about former Yugoslavia, it's the countries, the so-called West Balkan countries that I want to mention, like Serbia, Albania, Macedonia, Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I don't know if I forgot one to mention, but that are here, and basically the authorities here in Germany don't consider asylum because keine sicheren Herkunfts, not secure countries over there, and that also is to see in connection that the Holocaust, that the genocide which happened to Roma people in Europe has not adequately been aufgearbeitet. I'm sorry. Worked on, right? And recognized, yeah? So
also particularly regarding what you have just said, right? We are living in times where there's still Holocaust survivors right among us, a few there's a lot of survivors who have never received justice of the second persecution in Germany.
Right.
And then they are still deported. The countries where they are still persecuted are labeled secure countries, right?
Right.
And we have like a right-wing shift in general politics.
100%. Yes. So if you're not having the access, and that brings along no access to healthcare system. There's no full coverage for our people, and also a lot of racism that they face. And the educational system is very racist to our children, and teachers don't interfere when our kids experience violation, don't respect parents, don't take decisions into consideration from parents, make decisions without including the parents. Sometimes it's language barriers, sometimes, but all of the times it's racism, it's pure racism. And also schools work very close with the social workers. And what's hard for our women, I would say, always the fear of child abduction. And that's a fear that is berechtigt? Legitimate, yeah, because this has history, child abduction of our children. Yes, so they all come together, and that's what I would say are the hurdles for our women and mothers and children and families to live a human life, like with human rights and adequate, and not in desolate Zustände. Conditions, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Heidi, you just heard what Svetlana said, and Alexandra already mentioned it. It's getting worse. You have been working on empowerment, and if we take a look at Germany, some people might claim, well, it's getting better for you, right? You're here at the university, you just had your first report on anti-Gypsyism, you have a special, wie sagt man nochmal, Beauftragter? And a special official who is just concerned with anti-Gypsyism, right? So everything is going well in Germany for the women particularly, isn't it? We had 2 women and a gay person of the Romani community in a research commission. What do you think? So much emancipation here.
Yeah, totally. That's why we can give up right now and stop doing our work and become gardeners or something. No, of course not. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we did have this research on empowerment, also with Asiye Kaya and Doci Reinhardt, and you were also there as someone to witness. And so we had some Romani people who were working on this. And in this research on empowerment, we were asking what are your obstacles and what are your strategies. And first of all, what is very interesting is we found out who are the self-organizations, because that hasn't been done before. So who are the self-organizations that are in Germany? The Romani self-organizations, not the NGOs working for Roma. That was an important distinction that we also got from the commission as a task. So only people who had like more than 50% leadership of Romani or Sinti leadership were considered Romani self-organizations. So that melted down to only 80 organizations in Germany. And if you think of a population of 80 million and a problem of racism with like, I don't want to guess, 90-something%, I would guess, then there's one organization for 1 million people, huh? I think that's a bit hard. And then if you look at, okay, who are the feminist organizations, then we're not better or worse than the mainstream. And we also have only 15% of the self-organizations who consider themselves feminist or intersectional. So that even boils it down to less organization and people who would be able to answer certain questions in a profitable way. And then also, you do have those people, but that doesn't mean that they get access to any places. So we do have, as we could show, you know, after this lecture series, no one can say anymore, well, we don't have any professionals in this field, you know. That's not possible anymore, because you can just be like, here's a link, you know, just inform yourself. But still, we don't have those people in power, right? You mentioned the official against anti-Gypsyism, and I'm not sure how much power this person already has, because to me this looks like a very representative role where you can say, oh, there's racism and that's really bad, but what are the real effects that will be implemented in the Romani realities of the people? And I don't see the money being put where your mouth is, so that is a problem. And then, of course, this person is a gajo, and of course, this person is a man. Who is it for the national?
Step in and interrupt you for a second, because all the things that you just mentioned with the 15%, just imagine people, this is like a handful of organizations, and we are the ones who have to do everything right that all the man-led organizations do wrong, right? And they are the ones who are being funded and we ain't. Or this is also a problem that you are mentioned, which is being mentioned in the survey, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so there's a problem of funding for all the organizations, not only for the Romani feminist organizations, and it is very diverse if we look at the Romani feminist organizations. We do have Romani feminist organizations who can't work as much as they could be funded. You know, that is also a problem that is happening, I can say from our experience, basically. But yeah, to come back to that. So in these official positions, we don't have any Romani people or Sinti people in the parliament in Germany. We don't have them, like parliamentarians, you know? This is something where the Balkans are better than we are, you know? So I mean, this is something where we can also acknowledge that there's a lot of things we don't have, and we don't have any, even the jobs that are specifically for Romani people, which are, for example, this official, which should be for Romani people, because it says, what does it say? Für das Leben der Sinti und Roma, for the life of Sinti and Roma is in the title, but that doesn't mean you have to employ Roma or Sinti in your, and that is only the level of representation. That is not yet the level of implementation, you know, and this only follows up through to the lives of those people who are not that fortunate to sit here for a little bit of money to talk, you know. So I don't know, and even those who are capable to talk, they are often burned out, they're very precarious, they do this in their free time, you know, so there's a lot of struggles, and I think Alba also tried doing this with her research on feminism in Europe to show what are the issues, and she found very similar issues all over Europe. So this is
It's structural.
It's structural. It's structural, and yeah. I mean, but there are strategies. We come together. We talk about our ancestors. We have a very big culture, I would say, of like respect for the elders. Is my feeling, and I think that gives a lot. That gives a lot to also the youngest people in here, and I have the feeling. If I should end on an optimist note, there are
Sorry, Heidi.
there are young people who have it easier than we had, because I didn't have a Romani pen archive when I started. It wasn't there. I didn't have books to just look up or to just find out who are the Romani feminists. David here came for every lecture series. He's our most loyal student, and he had the opportunity to come to this lecture series. This is not nothing. It is something.
Be grateful, people.
And perfect. Yusla has her own archive inside of her. Exactly. So I would say that we could have a bit more for the next generation. Maybe. I don't know. Ask them in 20 years.
Well,
you know?
That's a very, very good hashtag. 20 years, Alexandra. It has been since you have come to Germany and have seen how it is here, and then you went overseas, and some people here in Europe, in Germany, believe In the US, it's much better. You have some institutional representation like Magda or like Ethel or like you know, people who are like icons for the couple of Romani girls and flinters here, and everything is so going well there and nothing works here. What is your impression coming back to Germany?
That's pretty much accurate. No, I'm just kidding. So I was last in Germany in, I think, 2001. In 2001, I came to Germany to a conference in Hamburg. It was the Roman und Sinti Union. It was Rutgo's organization. And the conference was sponsored by, I think, the Council of Europe. And I was a young activist. I was I was 21. And I didn't see many other women activists there. There was very much the feeling that I was out of place. The only other women, and I talk about this in my article back then, the only other women I saw were in the kitchen, preparing food. And when a conference is not funded well, who's the burden going to fall on, right? It's going to be Romani women that the burden's going to fall on. So they were preparing the food, doing all of that. And now, 2024, right? I'm part of this forum that's revolutionary, the Uni Romnja, the archive, all the Romani organizations and other trailblazers. We have a book, right? We have the book on Romani women's movement. This was unimaginable to me back then. That says something. I couldn't even imagine it. That's how big it is. But on the other hand, if you look at all the major indicators, health, education, employment, we're still in the same place or worse, right? Political representation. You have to talk about something like affirmative action, and I think here you guys call it positive action. I think that it exists to some extent based on gender, and to the extent that it doesn't take race or ethnicity into account, it's positive action for white women, for white Gaige women, to the extent we have it at all. You have to look at the way that the law misunderstands Romani women. If you look at the discourse of the European Court of Human Rights, even our wins are minimal. I talked about the forced and coerced sterilization, how we couldn't even muster up enough evidence, supposedly, to establish a racial discrimination claim. We couldn't represent a racial discrimination claim, even though Romani women were forcibly and coercively sterilized, in part based on their race and the fact that they have women parts. So that was unintelligible to the European Court of Human Rights. So if you look at all of these things, we're still in the same place or worse. If you could pull up the picture, one of the first things I thought about getting off the plane is, okay, where are my people? I'm in Europe now. I'm going to see my people everywhere. I'm so excited. The picture. I sent you a picture. Huh? No, I sent you one with a picture. And one of the first, it should say picture in your email maybe. Sorry, you have to put your email on the screen. No. So one of the first, so I'm looking for my people, and I knew because I studied abroad and I was in Spain. I worked with the Asociación Secretariado General Gitano back in 2000, and I knew all my people that I saw. There were no other Roma students. I'm still to this day, I'm the only Romani woman lawyer in the US. Not even, like, the only one. That's a gosh darn shame. And so I was looking during my junior year abroad, and all the Roma I saw, the Romanian Roma, were on the streets begging, selling farola. And this is where I saw my people, right? This is the first, scroll down. This is the first image I had of my people, and I wasn't surprised. I couldn't wait to see her, right? I couldn't wait to see us because I knew we're here, and I was hoping we weren't swept somewhere out of visibility into the slums, right? So that Berlin looks more respectable. I was hoping to see my people. I knew that this is what I would see. And I think that when I saw her in the cab, I felt exposed, you know? I felt exposed because here I am, and no matter how many Louis bags I have, no matter how many engagement rings, no matter how many degrees I have, that's me. That's me, and that will always be me, because as long as we have one of us begging on the streets, begging to survive, and we're pushed to the brink in that manner, that's all of us right there. That's all of us. And to the extent we ignore them, we walk past them, we act like they're not there, it really reminds me of, and I had to pull this up now, the Wikipedia. It's when you're going to Europe, folks say, oh my gosh, you're going to Europe, so exciting, the tourism, all the things you're going to see. To me, it reminds me of the Fall of Icarus. Do you guys know that painting, the Fall of Icarus? And there's this beautiful landscape everywhere, and everyone's chilling, plowing their little fields, having, you know, just an ordinary day. And then in the sea, you see Icarus' legs, his little white legs over there coming out of the water. Do you see? He's drowning. Everything is life as usual, business as usual, like nothing's going on. And that's Roma. People walk past us. We're begging on the street. Sometimes they'll kick us, like that famous case with the little girl in Greece. That's one, you know, that's the top of the top of the one of the few cases that we've heard of anyway. So to me, that's basically, when I come to Europe, it's Icarus drowning is in the foreground, not the background. It's not about, oh, tourists and sightseeing and kikiing and, oh, I'm going to see this side, I'm going to see that side. No, I want to see my people. We're still, to the extent that we're still begging on the street, things are still bad for us. Just because time passes, I think people equate that with progress, and that's not the case. That hasn't been the case for Roma, right? And so, and since I'm talking about that painting, the real life example that I brought up during my talk too, and that will stick with me till I die, right? I've been doing this, I mean, I know what you're thinking, I'm way too young to have been doing this 25 years, but no, I'm just, so the extent that right there, that is Roma. The two Roma women that drowned, Christina and I think Violeta Jovovic, the two young girls on the beach while the Italian folks were sunbathing, that will always stick with me, because the indifference to Romani pain, that it's really, in a visceral way, it's summed up right there. The indifference to Romani women's pain, the beggars that you see on the street that you dismiss, and the fact that, you know, some Roma who do become educated think that we are removed from that or want to distance, and then there are certain things we do to distance ourselves, right? And it goes into the politics of respectability that Carmen Gheorghe was talking about. You know, when I came to this conference, I wanted to bring this because there's a reason I'm wearing neutral lipstick and not this, right? There's a reason, and in the US it's similar for other women of color too. There's a reason when you go to conferences, you put on your little pearls, right? You don't wear, do not wear hoop earrings. Do not wear more than one ring. No, do not wear a chain. Do not wear gold. And to court especially, right? To court, do not wear gold. Do not wear flashy shoes. Do your hair a certain way. Don't show any cleavage, because then you're Esmeralda, you know, we're very close to that at any given moment, right? All of the preparation that goes into just existing in these spaces was something that I was thinking of, and I was struck by Carmen Gheorghe's talk, because, and the manifesto that Romnja is her organization. The manifesto struck me too, the manifesto they put up, because she was describing the very things I was describing in the article in 2004. So that tells you pretty much what you need to know about what has and hasn't changed. I was describing the exclusion of Romani women from anti-racist discourses, from feminist discourses, from international NGOs, the way our perspectives are minimized, the way, you know, essentially we're neglected, the way if we bring up gender in racial context, it's seen as fragmenting the movement and doing something completely different. If we bring up race and domestic violence conferences, then we're seen as bringing up something that has nothing to do with domestic violence. If we talk about the police at feminist conferences and our relationship with the police and why we can't call the police or we don't feel safe calling the police, that's something different. We're talking about something else. That's not feminist. That's not gender anymore, right? All of the things that I was talking about back then, she's talking about now. And the way that activists are marginalized, including LGBTQ plus Roma. So I can't remember what your question was because I went off
Everything you said is
on a rampage. But that's the answer.
I would like to continue right where you left off, because you just mentioned LGBTIQ Roma, and we are like the first organization, not the first, where LGBTIQ Romani people are being advised or helped, because that was the Romani pen, but we are the first who are like very visibly advocating. And I just felt what all of you said, in the sense of, I go to those fancy conferences and I'm invited because I'm a light-skinned Sinti woman. I can articulate myself in 8 fucking languages. I can talk fancy shit, I can dress the way that people will invite me. I can, present myself in a way people will, perceive me as one of them, right? One of them. But when I go home and I get a call at 1 a.m. from a homeless, gay, or queer, or trans Romani person, a child, it's mostly children between the age of like 14 and 27. It's young people who was just thrown out of their home and has nowhere to go, because when the second that they lose the Romani community as a network, the second that they are outed as queer, they have nowhere to go, because society hates them for being queer, they hate them for being Romani, they hate them for the gender issues, and then when their own parents start to hate them as well in their own community, there is nothing left, and there's little children, they have no food in their fridges, They have no food in their fridges. They have never heard of a cool academia place. They have never read a book because maybe they cannot read, because their parents cannot read, because they are stateless, because all of these things, because they are fucking poor, And then I go to fancy conferences and people are talking about emancipation, they are talking about equity, they are talking about all these achievements, and I think when I go home, they will still have nothing to eat and nowhere to go, and they will still die on the streets, and none of you has a solution for this. And it upsets me. It upsets me greatly. It upsets me so much sometimes that I feel kind of hopeless, like, where do we go from here, right? And how to build solidarity also inside of our communities with all the intersections and the different networks of violence that we are exposed to and that we have to struggle against and to survive in. Amdrita, I really love your work. This is where I come to you, because you are one of the people who inspire me personally in the way you deal with that and the way how you channel through your work so much energy towards other women and Flinter people. And you do this also by art and also by therapy. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. And thanks for all the women who talked now before me. I just can sign, sealed, delivered. I decided to combine therapy, psychotherapy, and arts, because for me, arts was always a medium, an instrument of healing, and it's actually also a collective healing for the Roma community where I was growing up and what I've seen around me. The therapy that I'm giving is not exclusively for Romnja and Sinti, but I have the healing circuits where I only have Romnja and Sinti, like women in Flinter person. And I've realized how deep, how many layers transgenerational trauma exist in these bodies, bodies of hurt, of resilience, with less resources to live with. And when I realized I have the one-on-one teachings and coaching and healing, how you call it today in many ways, because therapy is a word that many people trigger, especially in our community, so I try to reframe it differently. So I say, no, we make coaching, it's just like talking, But actually what's happening is they open more when we do a group therapy session instead of one-on-one. One-on-one comes most of the time after group therapy session, including using terms and means of creative skills. I have always on the table some papers with acrylic painting mediums, or even aquarelle, whatever they want to choose. But also I have a camera there and just a paper and a pen. So when they feel free to write something down, to paint something, or to take a picture of whatever comes there in their minds. And what I realize is that transgeneration trauma is something that is omnipotent still. It's something that's still present, something that happens in the past that we didn't live through, but our parents, our grandparents, this exists still in our bodies. So it is also proven in epigenetic researches. And I have, there was, I think, 2 essays published now from Romnja Feminist Library. You mentioned Alba. They have published many articles and essays of Romnja feminists. Yeah, this is Alba. This is, please give up for Alba and Aldessa. I just talked about you. Yes, they are part of the Romnja feminists. And yeah, and it's really important to talk about post-traumatic growth. We are growing also of trauma, and we don't grow alone. We are social beings. We need a community, and the community that I realize is important needs to be inclusive, intersectional in my work, not just healing and therapy, also arts. I've learned so much from the Afro-diasporic communities, from the Asian diasporic communities. I mean, Romnja and Sinti are Asian diasporic. They have Indian roots. So it's important to learn from each other and not to live just in our own bubbles, because this can lead to steps that the system is actually trying to reproduce with us. So the system that is not just racist, it's classist, is sexist, ableist, it has so many layers, tries to put us also in these categories and reproduce each other. So it's a kind of affirmative sabotage that we need to give in, that we need to approach. And I use these terms in my therapy sessions. And my therapy sessions is not conventional, or actually I did the training and everything, but I'm a Romani, so I have my own resources to combine my therapy sessions with arts. But I want more and more, because I'm working also in the political field with Roxanna. We have our own NGO. I'm working initiatives, anti-colonial room in Cologne, because I'm from Cologne. And it's important to decolonize our therapy sessions, our art perception, our perception of ourselves, of each other. Because still, even when it's about beauty, people claim to say beautiful is that what is Eurocentric and want to look more like the colonizers, we say. But actually we need to decolonize so many things. Also in the Romani feminist approach is what I do in my work, to decolonize the therapy sessions and also to see what is healthy for us. It's not healthy just for yourself individually to gain money and to empower yourself, and then to go outside and say, I have reached the point to be an empowered feminist Romani. This is not for me empowerment, because empowerment is always including the liberation of other people. So you need, if you want to liberate yourself, your inner system, the revolution begins always from inside out. So there are many people fighting the system outside, but they don't understand the system inside. So my approach is always systemic. And that's why everything what we do is, I think most of the time, I don't want to say self-exploiting, because we don't get paid for everything. But to be honest and really frankly said, what I achieved is not, Germany cannot pay actually what we have done, because they don't even have the money anymore for what they have taken away from us. They are still doing stuff behind our back in a systemic, in a structured way, and what they do with the money that should be actually a reparation medium, we don't know what they do with this. And this includes all communities. So I focus more on my communities, how we get the money, how we can afford the money and can empower other people. So it's really, it has many layers, but that's the way I see a collective feeling. And my approach is also to step away from the political structures, to be honest, because the way how politics is reframing us can be very one-dimensional. We are more than this, and art can be political. The living can be political, university is political, so we need to see political not just something that we need to see in the parliament. Political is everywhere where you go and where you leave a statement. So my approach is to be more an artist, also as a psychotherapist. Thank you.
What really empowers me about your approach of healing, Rita, is that shifting, and not only yours, but from the feminist movement we have here in Germany and in Europe, I see more and more development away from working for the 80 million gadget, for example, we have in Germany, that we do service work for free and let ourselves be exploited in the hope that the violence will decrease, which isn't happening, right? We heard it here. And more starting to focus on building resources inside of our communities. Audre Lorde once said, "I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own." What I feel personally hinders us many times inside of our community from building strong feminist and queer feminist bonds and solidarities, right, is that we are sometimes, I have a feeling, right, please correct me, this is a question to all of you, that we are performing for the gadget and performing a form of feminism sometimes that is against our nature and against the strength that we have inside of our communities. Because when I imagine solidarities, when I imagine how do different generations, for example, connect the elderly people, the elderly icons with the youth, right? Or even horizontal solidarities like feminists, queer feminists, etc., I imagine that space where we sit on a table and have a coffee, you know, where we just sit together, authentically be ourselves and not having to perform for anybody, but be very direct. But often-wise, I feel that these spaces are missing, and we right now are lacking also the tactics on how to create them. So what do you think, how do we move on from here into the future? And yeah, just how do we move on and start or build better solidarities, bonds of solidarities? How do we heal our communities in that sense?
I have something to say, I think. So what I feel is that there's a lot of truth in what also Carmen described and what you were mentioning in this, she called it performing vanilla, your vanilla self or something. It was very nice. Yeah, so it was like, and she also said that this is a privilege of passing Romani women, white passing Romani women, that they can be perceived as white and stuff like that, and also like self-censoring yourself in order to be seen. So I think there's a lot that we do and that we have to question ourselves in when we're talking about us. Yeah, because we are from the Uni Romnja and the Romani Pen Archive. We're so diverse. This is the first thing I learned about our group, is that we're so diverse. We have like all different realities. It is so different if your family has been here for 600 years or if your family came here 40 years ago. You know, it's so different because, of course, these are the perpetrators. But I don't know. We have partisans in my family, you know. So this is a different story from like having 300 family members, like Rosagita Martel talked about, for example, and just 3 remained, you know. And this is now Austria, but still. So these are very, very different realities that we are referring to, and also narratives and ways to deal with it. That's why I'm always a bit shy to say we are them, or we are, we are the first, or we are, because all those things to me are like also a gaji kind of gaze, of like, maybe this is also what you were referring to, maybe I understood it wrongly, but to me this is like, we have a gaji kind of gaze which tries to make us homogenous, which tries to say this is the Romani woman, and they don't say Romani woman, and they have all these images about, and you mentioned Esmeralda, and and we have all these images that are very, very violent and that are defining us. And I think it is very crucial what you just said. We do have those spaces where we come together and we talk over coffee, at least us now. I'm also talking about Romani Pen. Romani Pen also, I think we got the criticism that it feels like a family, not a workplace, right? Because you're coming over and you're having coffee, and there's this carpet and there's this couch, and I mean this is how it was designed in a way also. And I think this is something where we can unlearn a bit, but also I think we're constantly unlearning and also learning anew what it means, because very often I find myself asking myself also with my sisters, and Isidora does these great workshops where we can discuss, I don't know, how to gender, or how to, I don't know, what does feminism mean for us, or, where we kind of sit together and discuss things and like try to find a way to define it from a Romani or Sinti perspective. Because I think that is so crucial, that we need those spaces where white people are not in there, and Gaji people are not in there, and also men sometimes are not in there. Sometimes they can be in there, sometimes it's helpful because they have some other knowledge or whatever. But I feel that this is where we are
They are not helpful.
We're deep. This is what Isidora always quotes. Also, Angela Davis once said. What did she say, Doka? We haven't achieved a lot. Okay, don't. We haven't achieved the revolution, but we deepened the understanding of ourselves, or of freedom, even. Yeah, that's a very beautiful quotation, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. So I think, yeah, there's something we do. Yeah.
Mach weiter. Yeah. If we talk about Romani Pen, I will continue. When you talk about performing, and I was just sitting and I was questioning myself, did I perform ever for the Gaje? And wie heißt es, wenn die uns Kohle geben? Like the funding, like when we get the funding to do our project, that's where I see myself perform, because I have to fill the criteria that they give us. I have to make sure I do everything in order, and I fill out 70 pages. I have the materials that we are expected to hand in, because we talked about it, even though during the process we probably thought about something differently, but we have to stick on the plan. That's when I see myself performing. But other than that, I wouldn't say that I'm in my work with the Uni Romnja Romani Pen Archive, I wouldn't say that we perform. I would say that's a very empowering environment, and that we need more of this. And when we talk, we need more of this. We need more resources to create those rooms, to make them accessible, to make it possible to have meetings like that. I mean, for instance, the Uni Romnja is such a beautiful project, but it took so much work and it took so much planning. And I want to thank Jane, but I'm going to thank you later too. But it was so much work to create this room, and it was so much requesting for funding and resources and so on, and having.
We should also thank you, actually.
That's okay.
She's too modest, but she did a lot of the boring bureaucracy work. You know,
so, now I'm a huge fan of storytelling, where we come together, where we talk together, where we develop strategies that are empowering us, where we can heal together, because I think it's possible, as I experience, only in the collective, but not individually. I don't believe in individual feminism and movement, but in a collective movement where we are all together and where we include the most marginalized. And in order sometimes to do this, it takes resources that we don't always have.
Now I have to be a little bit frank, because I'm completely with you. We should have this kind of movement. But my question is also, like, while we strive for that and while we put our resources and our efforts and our intellectuality all into that, in the end, and I'm talking from the inside now, I'm not talking from the outside gaze, leave that aside. It's still a struggle to come together, right? Like, when I think of our own past between or among each others, it's not even if we have the same vision or even if we have the same values, if we are understanding ourselves not only as communities of heritage or of belonging, but also a community of values. This is something that Hajdi taught me so much. I feel these values, how they are lived, are sometimes very different regarding or depending on the environment. And I know that there is some women in our circle that when we would show up with our organization, for example, or with the people that we represent, they would leave because they might see themselves as feminists, but they will still not sit on the same table as a queer person, right? So, or they will not sit with a young woman, with a young person who is using not that very fine language, you know. Particularly, I'm a Sinti person, right? I'm talking about elderly Sinti women who will not sit with a young Romani girl who is talking about Minch Panther, for example. And we still love our Minch Panther sisters who would have been here. So how do we work together when, or how do we overcome these differences? Or how do we keep these differences and still find ways to collaborate and have a joint fight for our own liberation? Also, Alexandra, I would love to hear from you about this, because I feel you have quite some opinion on that subject.
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on a lot of things. But I wanted to go back to the role model question you asked, because I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Kim Crenshaw, right, who basically raised me as an activist, and she was the only reason I try to apply intersectionality to Romani civil rights struggles. And I think that it's important. Perhaps I'm uniquely situated because I'm in the US and I've been raised by Black feminists, right, and other feminists of color. But I think in terms of the way forward, yes, there are divisions within our community, but sometimes we have to look outside, right, to other groups of color and coalition building, because Romani's situation, of course, is unique, and we have our own stuff and our own oppression, but there are many similarities with other groups of color, with other, Middle Eastern folks coming here, folks of African descent here. In Spain, it was folks of, Latino folks being there. So the different immigrant groups that are coming and other folks of color. And there are other people of color who have been in Germany aside from Roma too, right? So I feel like there's so much opportunity for coalition building, especially if we can't seem to find inviting spaces, right? We have to reach out and extend branches and talk to other groups of color, especially other feminists of color, right? Because there's value in building those bridges.
Okay, what can I include? I mean, most of the things I said in what I said. But I can go a little bit deeper. I think what most of the people miss in the fight against structural racism is that there is no racism, sexism without capitalism, and there are a lot of gaslighted people gaslighting themselves, a lot of self-gaslighting happening also in our communities, because they think empowering means going outside, doing academic stuff and having the privilege to talk about racism, but not mentioning the roots, where it comes from, where it stems from. So for me, it's also a social revolution that we need to do, and not like the democratic revolution that is actually a capitalist revolution. And this actually leads back to the system of exploitation and all these things of discrimination. So we need to face the truth that as long we don't call it as it is, that is dividing us, exploiting us, and putting us in those categories. What it is, it's capitalism in its best form that still exists, also exploiting, discriminating other communities. And then even going further, that we start to being racist to each other, not understanding that this system is feeding from this. As long we don't have this kind of systemic knowledge, a correlation or a commitment for community building is one-dimensional. And this is what I have learned in my years since I am doing this activist political work that is really draining, because politics has its tricks to, in this democracy, to think that you can use the same methods to reframe it, but then the outcome is still exploiting each other. So that's why, for me, to have the resources to empower each other and ourselves first means to be radical honest to ourselves and stop hating on other people, really hate. And there is one, she's also a feminist. She's not a Romani, but she's a feminist who brings it on the table. She brought a book outside, it means Hässlichkeit. Ugliness. Moshtari Hilal, yes. And Hässlichkeit, German is a language associative. When you find something ugly, it stems from hate. Hässlichkeit und Hass ist sehr stark verbunden. Ugliness and hate is strongly connected. So we should stop hating each other, because there is still such a lot of self-hate. We are socialized having these pictures of Romani people that, what you said, when you come over and you see, where are my people? Like, the question is, the people that you are looking for are actually everywhere. This is one part of our people. My roots, I come from a poor family. My family comes from Macedonia with Albanian Romani roots. They came here with the Gaje visum. They need to be good in arts or in sports or in anything to come over to flee the war. So there are many ways where our people are, but there are many classes where we are to find, like many other marginalized and racialized people. But we need to come together and understand that what connects each other and what is actually crucial for a revolution is actually by having a dialogue to talk about this, but not just in a university, actually everywhere. So this is something that I hope for, that this, although this is a last session, this is actually a beginning for having those kind of dialogues, for having those kind of conferences and events. Also in other places like to Romani Pen, to Uni Romnja, that you come over. Klunker, what is the street name? Kairunga Straße. Instagram Romani Pen. This is not over. It's like many people, the semester is over, so now new inputs. So it takes long time to implement what we have learned and to unlearn. So
after Amdrita now has called for a revolution and to abolish capitalism, which is what I agree with mostly, that's what we have to overcome, right? We are also slowly coming to an end of our wonderful last session, but it doesn't have to be the last. You can also, looking at the funders who might see this later or now, you can also fund a second Uni Romnja or more formats like that to have that conversation ongoing. I see you all are really excited, not only by this talk, but by others. I have one last question for the panel, which I would like, this is the way I would like to close. Like, we have all mentioned there's struggles ongoing, things are getting worse, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like we have one thing that it was mentioned by Hajdi. A big resource is that we have young activists, young feminist activists, young female and flinter activists, and they are now striving. They are becoming more and more, like from time to time. They have visions and they have a future ahead of them, and I feel they are equipped with good resources, right? But when you think of what empowers yourself and what empowers them and what kind of future you wish for, if you had one wish, or one statement to give, what would it be? To the young people particularly, the young Romani women who are watching us today.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to just say one sentence to the question before, that we have in our work, what we always do in our works that I've learned within the Romani pen and the Uni Romnja, so we don't really put too much attention in the difference, but we check where do we have the connecting points and where can we get together. And I think that's a very important point of view, because we could, be probably 90% have different point of views. We have the older generation, and also we should respect them and come together and check which language do we have to or could use, so we can get, sometimes we have to compromise. I think in order to move forward, we have to compromise. And yeah, and I would spontaneously, as a mother of 6 wonderful children, which I love so much, I love you, and I would tell the youth what I tell my own children: go claim what belongs to you, because I didn't have the courage for many years to claim and to be like, I was born and raised here and I'm a Berliner, I can do that now. But it took a lot of work. It took it took the collectives that empowered me. It took a bachelor degree for me, but I would say it doesn't need to take all this. You have rights and you should claim what's yours, especially young girls and women. Go for it and live your dreams, and don't forget the community.
This is the moment when you have to be very inspiring, I guess.
Inspiring, Hajdi,
I know. So I'm also a bit hung up, so I want to add one more thing to the last conversation. Means that we're in a good conversation, I guess. So what I feel is that, and it hurts me to say that, but we as Romani people, we do have the right to be conservative too. It's not a good choice, but it is a right, It is a right within a democracy. And I'm not saying it's the best structure that there possibly is in the world, as we're a minority, but I'm saying that we do have the right to have conservative people in our midst, and we do have the right to struggle with them also. And also, what is a very German thing that I need to say is we don't have a revolution. We're not even near a revolution, What we do have maybe is a network. Alba nicely put this together, what happened in European Romani feminism. What we do have now is maybe a Romani feminist network that is building up, that needs nurturing, that needs work, and a lot of work, a lot of unpaid, unsexy, bureaucratic work also, and also a lot of discussions and a lot of struggles within ourselves. And in order to get to a revolution, I'm gonna have to pass the stick, to the next generation, I guess. So I have no idea how that works, I have no idea how you get into a revolution. I believe in education, but I don't think it brings you there. So I don't know. Maybe we need something more radical, maybe we will, I don't know. We have this, I really want you to come up with something. And I really want you to... Sorry, Estera is the representative of all Romani youth right now. I really want you to challenge us, to challenge us older women. This is how I see myself. And to older. not old, older. I want you to challenge us and to ask good questions and to make mistakes, but to not forget where you're coming from. What did you have before you? Who are the ones that built the path for you? As you said so beautifully. So I think that's a good thing to do.
So if it's parting words, words of advice, or something inspirational, okay. So I guess by all accounts and measures, I've lived a good life, and it's time to pass the baton to the youth, right? Since I'm almost 45. But no, in all seriousness, life expectancy for Romani women in a lot of these countries are what? I have 15 more years, 20 more years if I had grown up here, or in Croatia, in Romania. The life expectancy is around, what, 66 years old, something like that, while for Gaja, for white women, it's around 80 years old. So if I had something to, I guess, relate to the youth, it would be to not be afraid to speak up, right? To speak your truth and to flip the script. Flip the script on integration. Oh, why are Roma so difficult to integrate? What is it that you're doing? What is it that Gaje are doing, that European countries are doing, that is making it so difficult for Roma to be included, right? When you see somebody begging on the street, ask the other questions. Don't just, be dismissive and, oh, that's not me. That's some Roma choose to beg. That's a profession. Or they're hustling somebody. What has the system done? What have the laws done? What have policies done to put this person on the margins, so far on the margins that they're not even scrubbing toilets, so far on the margins that they're begging you to allow them to survive? Because there's so much shame. People underestimate how hard it is to beg someone for money. I sold flowers at one point, and that was even difficult. People don't look at you, people ignore you, you feel like a piece of garbage. That is hard work. And there's also, stuff for Gaje to do, of course, right? If you read this manifesto, is it up in German? Is that what's up? Because I can't read German. I'm assuming that's what's up, no? The manifesto that Carmen Gheorghe and other activists put together at Romnja, read that. There's a way that this exclusion from NGOs is perpetuating the system of subordination, because we are the conduits, right? To the extent that you're excluding someone like Carmen Gheorghe, other LGBTQ plus people, Roma women and such, to the extent that you're excluding them in your politics of respectability or whatever it may be, your biased criteria for allowing entry, this myth of meritocracy where you think that certain degrees are indicators of your qualifications, to the extent that you're letting those keep Roma on the margins and keep these activists from having leadership positions in these NGOs, in the local NGOs and national ones and supranational, to the extent you're doing that, you're blocking access, right, to these vital conduits of information, because that's how empowerment was going to happen, through these activists. And I want to challenge the notion that the activists who make it to a certain level or attain a certain amount of education are somehow less authentic now, or they're less Roma. Guess what? We still have our communities to go back to. We still have our families to go back to. I'm a lawyer, and I got called a Tsiganka by another lawyer, a Romanian lawyer in the US. So we're not isolated, or insulated rather, from a lot of the racism, and we maintain connections to our communities. So they need to start interrogating their privilege and putting Romani women in positions of power in a lot of these NGOs and in decision-making powers. I want to see, next time I'm in Europe, I want to see a plethora of Romani women CEOs and parliamentarians, right? Work.
What I can add is that for me, intersectional feminism must be abolitionist. We need to have more abolitionist Romani feminists in this country, Europe-wide, or best way international. Also, the fact that healing became very inflationary Like everybody's talking about trauma and healing, but forgets that it's really something, it's reality for so many people that they don't suffer under post-traumatic trauma because they are in a state of constant traumatic state, and that these people live in a survival mode 24/7. If it's in Germany, if it's in the Balkan countries, if it's in the US, everywhere where people are discriminated and marginalized by the system. So we need to see that also as a revolutionary act, that these people who are fighting for the families, who are trying to do 2, 3, 4 jobs, as my parents did, as my aunties in my family, as the majority of the women who are sitting here, their parents, and even sometimes what we have done in our past. So this is also part of revolution. Revolution is not something that is one-layered. It has many layers. It starts with self-educating and unlearning the miseducation that you learned in this system. Because we are still miseducated to believe that we know many things better, or that we are the first. There is no Geisteseigentum. That is something highly colonized in this system. And there are still many people thinking, oh, I invented this and now we're pushing it. No, there are many people who have the same thoughts, but they don't have the same language to put it in reality. So perception is reality, and I wish for the current generation, for the next generation, but especially also for our generation, because we are sitting here with different ages, that we still keep on learning, unlearning, and stop gaslighting ourselves, that we need to be something for the better, but we are already what we need to be, and that we can be happy and fulfilled with therapy or with community. For many people, community is therapy. They don't have the resources for therapy. I say it as a therapist. So it's community can be healing. So focus on the community. And I'm talking about inclusive community. I'm not talking only like exclusively Romnja and Sinti. I'm talking about with all people who have their specific suffering that come together and to learn from this and to grow. Because only in inclusive rooms we can grow. This is what I want to say.
I was many things in my life. I cleaned toilets, I worked in restaurants and scrubbed dirty dishes, and now I'm here with excellent women in a university. So what I would like to give you, all that you that are here today and also those who will be watching this later, you can be whatever you want to be. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise just because you're women or queer or Romani or whatever. If you're black, if you're Ashkali, if you're whatever you want to be, you can be. Let nobody stop you from your vision. And don't mean that in a capitalistic way, oh, from dishes to from rags to riches or something. But I mean that you are excellent. Not only us sitting here, right? But you outside there listening to us, you right here in this room. Excellence is within you. You are the power that this world needs. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And regarding respect, always think of course, of your heritage and how your elders came to be who they were and how they raised you. But on the other hand, never ever let yourself be silenced by people telling you or gaslighting you to be respect or whatever. I'm not alluding to you, but in general, don't let people silence you in order for them to protect other people or protect themselves by violating you. You don't have to respect people who hurt you or to respect people who try to literally wipe you off of this earth. You deserve a spot right here, and I'm very proud of this young and strong generation and of the future to come. Thank you all so much for listening. Thanks to this great panel.
Thanks Rajana for the moderation. Thank you. Applause for her.
And many, many, many thanks. Many thanks to Romani Pen and everybody who made this possible. And just the last message, pay up, pay more Uni Romnjas, pay more panels, pay Romani Pen, pay us. We have PayPal. Thank you so much. Subscribe. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. Subscribe, people. Maria! Oh my God!
Okay, ja, okay. Gut. Ja, jetzt kommt der Dankesteil. Ich danke vor allen Dingen meiner Schwester Svetlana für diese großartige Organisation. Es war wunderbar, mit dir zu arbeiten. Es war großartig. Ich danke natürlich Romani Pen auch, besonders Isidora, sie kann wahrscheinlich ihren Namen heute nicht mehr hören, aber trotzdem danke für diese Idee und dieses Label. Aber natürlich auch danke an Nam José, der nicht da sein kann, und Yunus. Unser fantastisches Technikteam, das diese HU überlebt hat. Es ist Wahnsinn. Sia, Antonio und Basti. Die DolmetscherInnen, die mit uns gekämpft haben, Woche für Woche, und auch die SchriftdolmetscherInnen, die wir jetzt nicht sehen, aber die auch im Raum sind. Vielen Dank an euch. Ich danke aber auch meinen KollegInnen von der Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, von meiner, jetzt habe ich ganz vergessen, wie das heißt. Fachbereich, genau, jetzt. Bitte kurz mal, winkt doch mal kurz. Vielen Dank für eure Unterstützung, ohne die die Veranstaltung nicht in dieser Form durchführbar gewesen wäre. Und natürlich danke ich allen Zuhörenden, danke ich euch, danke ich Ihnen, dass ihr Woche für Woche gekommen seid, und last but not least natürlich auch allen, die referiert haben, die Vorträge gehalten haben, den beiden tollen Panels, und wir haben hier, jetzt habe ich den Namen vor Aufregung vergessen, Maria Bogdan und auch 2 Referentinnen hier, und auch Alba Hernandez. Nochmal mit uns im Raum, finde ich sehr schön, um zu feiern, dass wir zusammenkommen konnten, dass wir diese Vorlesungsreihe hatten. Und es wurde ja schon mehrfach angesprochen, vielleicht gibt es nochmal eine Uni Romnja, aber sicherlich nicht gleich morgen, das glaube ich nicht.
Ja, liebe Jane, natürlich möchte ich mich auch bei dir für die tolle Zusammenarbeit bedanken. Dankeschön. Ja, also wie oft wir telefoniert haben, wir haben sehr oft telefoniert, aber auch sehr viel gezoomt, auch mit dem Technikteam, sind die Nächsten. Vielen, vielen Dank dem Technikteam. Besonderen Dank für eure Solidarität und einfach für euer Verständnis, weil das ist nicht selbstverständlich, wenn wir mit Personen zusammenkommen und arbeiten, dass unsere Wünsche immer so respektiert und akzeptiert werden und dass wir nicht, genau. Und ihr habt all das umgesetzt, so wie wir wollten, und 1000-mal besser. Und auch lieben Dank an die DolmetscherInnen, die auch immer sensibel und vorher gefragt haben. Und das ist auch nicht selbstverständlich. Ganz, 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 ganz lieben Dank dafür. Und auch an unsere SchriftdolmetscherInnen. Genau, ich wollte mich ganz kurz bei meinem Team bedanken im Hintergrund. Natürlich an Isidora, auch schon wieder. Ja, danke. Gut, die kriegst du danach, okay. Aber, also, Genau, ich möchte mich ganz besonders an meinem Kollegen José Fernández Ortega bedanken, der leider keine Veranstaltung hier präsent sein konnte, aber im Hintergrund ganz viel gemacht hat. José, if you see this, I want to say thank you so much. I know you did so much. José ist verantwortlich für die Öffentlichkeitsarbeit, hat fleißig gepostet und war auch viel in Kontakt und hat mich ganz doll unterstützt. Thank you, José, so much. Auch einen großen Dank an meine Kollegin Lam, die im Hintergrund auch ganz viel organisiert hat und mitgemacht hat. Da sitzt sie schon mit Geschenktüten und sie hat mir immer die Poster eingepackt und das Wasser eingepackt und mitgedacht. Und wenn ich nicht hier sein konnte, war Nam hier und hat alles vorbereitet und auch kommuniziert. Nam, vielen, vielen Dank auch an dich. An meine Schwestern der Uni Romnja. Vielen, vielen Dank an all meinen Freunden und an das Publikum, das sich immer zugeschaltet hat, an die Person, an Nadi, die auch immer hier ist. Vielen, vielen, vielen Dank, dass du immer schön mitmachst und Fragen gestellt hast. Auch einen großen Dank an unsere Schwester Nadi. Und genau, ich möchte mich auch für die Kooperation der BPB bedanken, aber auch für die Förderung von Demokratie leben und besonders Frau Nowel, die auch heute im Publikum sind. Finde ich ganz toll. Vielen, vielen Dank. Genau, und ja, Younes, danke für die Fotos. Und ich hoffe, ich habe niemanden vergessen. Und of course, I want to thank all my sisters. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, but yeah, that were part of the Uni Romnja. And I want to finish with Opre Romnja.
Yunus, wenn die Fotos nicht Instagrammable sind, ne, bist du...